Hey listeners, last year was our 15th year of the best in food storytelling. As we head into 2025, we're kicking off a contest in collaboration with the podcast series Feast and Harmony and Sixth Man, where you have the opportunity to win a 4-night cruise for 2 on Chefs Making Waves, a food, wine, and spirits festival at sea. When you donate to HRN, you'll be entered for the chance to win a porthole cabin for 2 on Chefs Making Waves, sailing May 5th through 9th, 2025, from Miami to Cozumel, Mexico on Norwegian Gem. You'll also support another year of great food storytelling with a portion of your donation going toward disaster relief for the food and beverage communities within Western North Carolina and Southern California. This cruise is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for culinary adventurers, featuring top celebrity chefs including Jonathan Waxman, Antonio Lafaso, Robert Irvine, and many, many more. There's a myriad of experiences such as restaurant takeovers, live food and mixology demos, themed parties, and more. To enter your chance to win, please visit heritageradionetwork.org/cruise. Terms and conditions apply. You must be 21 or over to enter. That's heritageradionetwork.org/cruise.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
HRN is food radio supported by you. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org. Hi, listeners. I wanted to take a moment to talk about Heritage Radio Network, the organization that produces this podcast. HRN is the only podcast network dedicated to food, beverages, and the culinary world. It's also a nonprofit that educates emerging food storytellers. HRN brings listeners free podcasts on everything from the artistry of baking to the craft of brewing, the complexities of cheesemongering to the challenges of solving climate change. And they need your help. Help HRN thrive by going to heritageradionetwork.org/donate and making a donation to keep food radio free and accessible.
This episode is brought to you by Wisconsin Cheese. We've been making cheese in Wisconsin since before we were even a state, which may be one reason why we win so many awards for it. It's what happens when a whole state dreams in cheese. Find your next favorite cheese at wisconsincheese.com.
This is Capri Cafaro, host of Eat Your Heartland Out, back with another episode that is part of our limited series, More Than Maple, about Canadian food culture. This week, we are traveling from the Maritimes to the Prairies to learn about important programs serving the unique food security and job training needs of communities in Newfoundland and Labrador, as well as Alberta. Josh Smee and Laurel Huguet join us from Food First NL, and Anka Roman joins us from Ethnicity Catering and Cafe in Calgary. Josh and Laurel, welcome to Eat Your Heartland Out.
Thanks for having us.
Yep. This is exciting. I am really glad to be able to bring your voices and your program to our listening audience, which is both in North America as well as beyond via podcast. And not a lot of folks, at least in the United States, are as familiar with Newfoundland and Labrador. So just to give us a little bit of context, Josh, where are you?
That is a great question. So I'm joining from St. John's, which is the capital city of Newfoundland and Labrador. We are the easternmost province in Canada. So Newfoundland is an island in the Atlantic Ocean. We are an hour and a half after Eastern Standard Time. From where I sit, Dublin is about the same distance as Toronto, to give you a sense. And then the other part of the province is Labrador, which is a large northern territory on the mainland of Canada, extending all the way up into the Arctic.
And you serve both of those very diverse populations with your programming, yes?
We do, yeah. We're a province-wide organization.
That is fantastic. So tell us about Food First. I mean, you just have painted a picture of an island and then a very large portion of mainland Canada all the way to the Arctic. That certainly conjures up some, images of pretty diverse landscape, diverse people, and probably diverse food access.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And we try and match that with diverse programming as much as we can. So our organization, Food First NL, has been around for quite a while. We've been here 25 years now in the province. And our mandate is to advance the right to food in Newfoundland and Labrador. And so a lot, as you might imagine, fits into that work. The way we think about it is that we do that work along four pathways. The first of those is advocacy. So we advocate for the kinds of policy changes that are needed to improve people's access to food in the province. The second is organizing. So we do a lot of work with community organizations all over Newfoundland and Labrador to support them to do work on food. And even in a small province like this, so we have just about 500,000 people, there's probably 300 organizations that are doing some kind of work related to food and food security. So
Wow.
we do as much as we can to support those folks. The third pathway is taking action. And so we do operate some programs ourselves directly. That includes, for example, here where I am in St. John's, we operate a mobile affordable food market serving primarily lower income neighborhoods in the city. On the west coast in Newfoundland, we have a large food hub operation that's supporting access to local food from local producers. And in Labrador, we have a program supporting access to wild and country foods. So from time to time, programs like that, we're taking them on the ground. And then the final pathway for us is valuing people. And so for us, that means two things. Initiatives to support our own team. You know, food systems work is very much about individuals and talented people on the team, but then also valuing the voices of lived experience, people who have lived experience of food insecurity. And that's where our lived and living experience advisory group comes in. And Laurel will tell you more about that.
Awesome. Laurel, you are the program coordinator for this powerful project that is under the umbrella of Food First NL. How do you identify the individuals that are part of this advisory group, and what's your objective?
Great questions. I mean, you could start with just what food insecurity looks like. It means not having access to not being able to afford the food that you need to feel well and connected to your culture and land. And so there's a lot of different people who could be experiencing that. And it looks a lot of different ways for different people. So we let people self-identify what it means to have experienced food insecurity and let them use that self-identification to come to us and use that experience and that experiential knowledge to better inform policies around addressing food insecurity and poverty. And so that's our goal. So often our sector around addressing food insecurity and poverty has not done a great job of bringing in the people who are closest to the issues that we're looking to solve. And that's what League is about. It's about kind of reversing that mistake that our sector's done in the past and bringing forth a group that's been like traditionally marginalized, both like by our sector, but also just like institutionally, and putting them closer to the seats of power and to the conversations and decision-making tables where the policies that affect their lives most are being discussed and decided on.
So how do you, well, first of all, let me ask this question. As you mentioned, I mean, oftentimes these are individuals that are marginalized and more likely than not have not, as I think admittedly, as you said, have not been engaged with the institutions in one way, shape, or form, whether it's governmental institutions, nonprofit institutions, and basically the organizations that serve them. You're trying to change that, but part of that I would think is building trust with these individuals that have reason not to trust the system. How do you build those bridges to build that trust with these individuals?
It's a great question. I think a lot of it comes down to putting them into the driver's seat of what their advisory group looks like. And that's been increasingly the case. League's been meeting together, both online but in person, for a year and a half now, almost.
Oh, wow.
And so it comes down to, doing our best to create spaces where we recognize that people's experiences look really differently and valuing that despite having disagreements. But also the fact comes down to it. I don't have that lived experience, even though I'm in that position of power coordinating this group. So a lot of it is me being very mindful of taking steps back and letting this group, with the intention of putting people with lived experience into leadership positions and closer to power. It's at the same time, it's me taking steps back from that power. So yeah, I'd say a lot of it comes down to giving them the trust, I guess, to guide and lead and choose their own direction, and being as supportive as possible, both myself, but also Food First. And when they tell us stuff, listen and show them that their voices are valued, be that through paying them well, through carrying out on the ideas or concerns they're bringing to us, and showing that we'll be accountable to the best of our abilities to the expertise that they're providing us.
That's fantastic. A wonderful approach, a very inclusive approach. What's the response been so far, both from the participants as well as, the institutions that you're trying to kind of facilitate to get them a seat at the table, as you said earlier?
Yeah. Participants. I'd say there's like two main things that I hear from the participants. It's a real value add for them. They found a lot of joy and sense of worth and camaraderie among the group of them. It's become a place of a lot of laughter and vulnerability, but also tears and very honest, real conversations. And I think there's been some really strong bonds that have come from that. And a sense of restlessness, because creating actual meaningful change is slow, and they've accomplished a lot so far, but it's hard to get this real sense, especially as, food prices are going up and our wages and our incomes are, by comparison, going down. It's hard to get a sense that even these small wins have any meaning whatsoever. So from participants, I'm hearing this dual sense of this is worthy and valuable, and it doesn't feel like enough. And from institutions, it's interesting, the whole purpose we had in mind when bringing League together would be that it would be this standing body that organizations, but also government, could go to for advice, for counsel, for guidance on particular programs or policies. We kind of imagine League in some ways would be a little bit reactive to the needs of people doing things in and around poverty and food insecurity. But what we found is that, I guess, with League not having a big enough name, and maybe even the value of lived experience not being very well realized by institutions, we actually haven't got a lot of folks coming to League asking for that guidance. So we pivoted to not being reactionary, but being proactive. So they've set themselves with two key advocacy goals, and instead of waiting for politicians to invite them to the table, they're putting together letters to invite politicians to their table. We're looking at a very likely upcoming federal and provincial election, and League has their sights set on being really involved in trying to engage with policy platforms and candidates, but also their communities, and talking about the policies and the changes that they believe will really address food insecurity and poverty in meaningful ways.
That is great, and as you're right, the timing is right. So, Josh, what have you noticed? As far as this particular initiative and how maybe the participants are what you are learning from them, which I'm assuming you are as an organization learning from them too, informing maybe how you design, redesign, or develop new initiatives.
A couple of things, and that's, I think, a really good way of putting it, because one thing, I'm not sure I would have described it this way before we started the program, but when League advocates, one of the organizations they advocate to is us, right? Like Food First NL as a kind of systems organization, we have power too, right? We are advocates ourselves, but we have power in the system. And so I think one thing I've been as in my chair at Food First, having League there has pushed us. I think the way that it shows up in my day to day, the most in the most immediate sense, is League has injected a more urgency into the conversation around corporate power than we had. Thinking more about the role of corporations in the food system and the concentration. And so Canada's grocery sector is even more concentrated than the US is. And that has a lot of impacts on food access here, for example. And in general, working on corporate power was something that immediately came up on League's radar screen. And it's not that it wasn't on ours, but I think it has been more, it has been moved to the forefront of some of our thinking, for example. And I think we'll see that continuing to happen as League says, Food First, you have a big megaphone as an organization in a small province, and here's how we want you to use it. And so I think that's there's some kind of points of focus that have already started to shift for the organization because of that advocacy. I think the other way that Leaguers have gotten involved, though, is in this more consultative way. And one thing I've been really finding fascinating is that League is a province-wide group. So there are folks from every corner of Newfoundland and Labrador from a really wide range of circumstances. But they've been willing to engage on some pretty specific files. So we in St. John's, where I'm sitting right now, we're building up, for example, a new community food space, a physical hub for food programming. And League provided some really interesting, and I think will continue to provide really interesting guidance on the development of that space, even though some of them are in St. John's or not in St. John's and will maybe very rarely use it, but they still had in their heads what would be a space that felt good as someone coming from that lived experience perspective. So I think there's been maybe broader applicability to League's input on our internal programs than I would have thought going into this. And also, I was really impressed by how quickly League was able to take on that agency that Laurel was talking about. So yeah, we just recently completed a round of intake, some new members, because some folks moved on as they do. And League ran that own process itself. Like I, as CEO, I wasn't involved at all. I just found out who the Leaguers were when they were done. And I thought that was really great. And I'm not sure that I was expecting that we'd get to that level of autonomy within a relatively short time. So I think it is, continuing to have kind of unexpected and interesting interactions with our work, and it's going to shape it in all sorts of ways that I probably won't be able to predict even from where I'm sitting now.
That's amazing. It's wonderful to see, a concept have impact and in a way that maybe wasn't necessarily originally anticipated, but is incredibly valuable. That is just awesome. Josh, I want to talk to you a little bit as well about some of these other, just because, we touched upon the fact that there is, a pretty diverse landscape, literally and figuratively, between like Newfoundland and Labrador. And so, you talked about the Western Food Lab and then the Labrador Anchor Collaborative. Can you give us a little bit more understanding of what functionally those look like and the kind of food that you all are able to source and how you source it for those communities?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. For listeners to your show, the food landscape is quite different here than I think for many folks. One thing folks should know is that access to wild foods, so gathered things like berries and hunted things like moose, caribou, partridge, in Canada, Newfoundland and Labrador has the highest rate of wild food access of any of our provinces. So essentially everyone here either harvests themselves or knows someone who does. There's really never more than 1 degree of separation like that. And so I'll maybe start with the Anchor Collaborative in Labrador, because I think Labrador is a primarily Indigenous part of the province. And so there's a particular importance on helping rebuild the food systems that colonialism destroyed. So for a long time, Labrador was administered in a very colonialist way, in a way that very intentionally attacked traditional ways of life and traditional knowledge about food. That's still true in lots of ways, but there's also much more capacity there now for Indigenous self-government and leadership and food sovereignty. And one of the terrains that plays out on is around food. And so what we're trying to do with the Anchor Collaborative is actually connecting it to the healthcare system. So thinking about where does government have the biggest footprint in community, sort of financially and programmatically? And in Canada, healthcare is a provincial responsibility. More than half of our provincial budget is just healthcare, right? And so our health system has immense power. And the goal of the Anchor Collaborative, and we're one of a number of collaboratives across the country that are working together, is to use the health system as this anchor to shift the food system. And so in our case, the shift that we're aiming to do is strengthen access to traditional foods. And so that includes within the healthcare system itself. So the one of the main pilot projects that we've been running as part of that work is bringing wild game and wild gathered foods into long-term care institutions so that Indigenous elders.
That's incredible. How do you do that?
It's been complicated, So, as you might imagine, the regulatory framework around this is very complex, right? Because, what we're doing in practice is working with Indigenous partners to identify hunters who are going out on the land and who can be trusted to do a good job of the hunt. Working with those hunters to ask them to harvest, for example, say 40 partridges. We cannot buy the partridges because you can't buy wild game in this province, but we can compensate hunters for their costs, for their gas, their ammo, things like that. Those partridges get plucked and delivered to the long-term care facility kitchen, and the cooks there prepared for the patients. So that's what happens. Getting there took a kind of complex dance between our fisheries and wildlife enforcement division, our food safety folks, and Indigenous partners who were the ones who had the knowledge about who were the hunters in community who could be really trusted with this work, right? So it did take a fair amount of time, but that was the goal, was to work out a procedure that's now something that other sites, other programs can adapt. That, if you want to bring wild game to the table, there's now a pathway, and it's been kind of signed off on by people in the relevant bureaucracies. And so it's going to be now easier for people to do that. And we're aiming to now make that a possibility across healthcare institutions across the province. And that's not the end point for this work. I think we're also thinking about how does the healthcare system invest in a longer term way in Indigenous food systems. So things like preserving traditional ways of preparing foods, or supporting the equipment costs of folks who need to go out in the land, all these kind of things. But for now, the biggest shift has been just kind of opening the door a bit wider to those wild foods in those healthcare spaces, which is really meaningful. If you're an Inuit elder coming down from the north coast of Labrador to live in long-term care in Goose Bay, which is the service town for much of Labrador, and someone feeds you, spaghetti or something that has never been part of your diet, it's really, culturally traumatizing. And so bringing back some of those more traditional foods into people's diet has been, I think, in and of itself, really rewarding.
Absolutely. And, and food is medicine for many as well, particularly from, a more, traditional Indigenous context. You really are painting a really great picture of the province for our listeners who I think are going to have a much better understanding of what the lay of the land is there. So let's move on to the food hub of, how you get the local food there.
Yeah, so our food hub operates in Western Newfoundland. Probably the best analogy for Western Newfoundland, if there are Americans listening, would be kind of it's actually part of the Appalachian Mountains and looks kind of like them. It's the same mountain range. It's sort of hill country. There's there's one small city there, lots of small communities. But it's also one of the kind of agricultural heartlands of Newfoundland and Labrador, of which there are not many. We have very little food production here relative to other parts of the country, and farms are very small. So in our context, for example, a 100-acre farm would be huge in Newfoundland and Labrador, right? And so in and around Western Newfoundland, there are many, many food producers. It is one of these breadbaskets, but there's very limited ability to access that food without just driving door to door from farm to farm. For a number of reasons, the region is too spread out for a farmer's market sort of system to work particularly well. And so access to local food is really relationship based if you know where to go. And so what we ended up doing was actually adapting a project from Cape Breton Island, which is just across the water from Western Newfoundland. We stole their project model with permission. And the way the Food Hub works is we operate an online store that any local producer can register to be a part of. Every week, they log in and post what they have. So, for example, you might say, we have 30 sacks of turnips this week. And then the store opens and customers can log on and they can order from as many producers as they want. So we have 45 producers in that system now. They make the order. The producers, all that they see is if they get a pick list that says, in total, we need 50 bags of carrots from you. They don't need to know who it goes to. We send an electric delivery van around to all the different producers, pick everything up in bulk, bring it back to a central hub, and pack individual orders. So you might have a box that says Capri on it that has products from a dozen or 24 local producers. And then we actually ship those boxes, some of them back out to collection points in rural communities, usually at rural stores. So you don't have to go all the way to the city to pick up your big box. It actually comes back out to you. And so the advantage for the producers there is they're only harvesting what's been pre-sold, and they don't have to spend time off their farm or off their operation to sell it. And then for the consumers, they don't have to spend a whole day driving around to 20 different farms to fill that basket with local. And so that model has been quite successful. It's growing really fast because it's filling, I think, particularly in that community, a need, especially for folks who are newer to the city and don't have those networks of even knowing where the farmers are, but they can log onto this website and make this order and be right into it with this really dense network of local producers. And it's, I think, particularly important for the smaller producers. So lots of folks on 1 or 2 acre plots doing these kind of intensive operations, way too small to sell into retail stores. This is often their primary point of sale. And so it's really important for them and for them to get embedded in the food system.
That's amazing. I mean, you guys are doing so much in so many different arenas. And that is making a major impact. And I'm just, again, kind of reviewing some of the things that you've done. I know that you're also engaged in school meals that I wanted to at least, and I'd be curious, as well, to bring Laurel back into the conversation, whether or not, the issue of food insecurity and access to healthy meals in the schools is something that the League Group has ever brought up.
A lot of the leaguers are moms. So the value of school meals is very, very prevalent. And not just in terms of, saving that time or that headache of packing, but also the topic of what is it like to bring in culturally relevant and culturally appropriate foods for an increasingly diverse school population. A couple of our leaguers are new Canadians. And so, when they hear about kids in their schools getting bullied for the foods that they bring into school, the lunches that they pack, that's also a really big part of the conversation about school foods. But also destigmatizing different cultural foods, and also destigmatizing what it looks like, or the experience of food insecurity, because that's another story you'll hear is, kids not packing the, I don't know, name brand or what have you of the snack of choice, and that being frowned upon and looked upon as shameful as poverty.
Yeah.
So that shows up in school meals, but I mean, other institutions as well. We have seniors who are leaguers, or children of seniors in long-term care homes, and the food in long-term care homes is really important. We're also talking about food in prisons and in other carceral institutions. Institutions are big, powerful financial movers. And so what it could look like for those institutions to be buying local, for example, that's something that's really meaningful for leaguers who feel that like locally produced, harvested, fished and caught food is really meaningful to them. But also because we all have people in those institutions where they're not being served the food that connects them to the land and the waters, their cultures, and that's not okay. And so that's a big point of interest and passion for leaguers as well.
Oh, I believe it. And you mentioned the water. So I do have to ask, I mean, it's, I can imagine that logistically getting access to food that comes from the water is maybe a little bit more specified, shall we say, than, getting something, from a farmer that's growing something on the land.
It's interesting how fish sits in the food system here. Like we're a fishing province, particularly the island of Newfoundland. The only reason people are here, or at least non-Indigenous people, the only reason Europeans are here is to fish, right? The island was founded as a fishing colony. You weren't even allowed to stay the winter. You were just supposed to come for the summer and fish and go home. And eventually enough people jumped ship that we became a permanent place. But now, access to fish is really complex. So our fishery is primarily an industrial fishery that harvests for export. Access to local fish in Newfoundland and Labrador is really difficult. There are very few fish shops. Local people have a really limited, they call it the recreational fishery, which I think is kind of insulting. Most people would call it the food fishery. Only on weekends in the summer can we go and harvest cod for ourselves. And for many people, access to local fish is limited, and there's not a lot of fish in people's diets. So there is, I think, this connects also in our work to the kind of policy and regulatory work that we do, because fisheries policy is an area that we don't touch a lot because it's an extremely kind of politicized, federally regulated space that's a little bit, we're honestly a little bit scared to touch it sometimes. But in practice, there are places we try to get at it. The Food Hub is actually one of the only places in the province where you can order local fish online. So we're proud of that because we do have some fishers in that system. And then there is also, you mentioned, and we were talking about school food programs. So one of the dynamics of school food here is there is some work to think about what does it look like to do fish to school programs, and how do we get around some of the perceived barriers around allergies and things like that, and bring local fish harvested by local fishers into schools in a way that reconnects people with those kind of traditional foodways. And there's some really creative work that some of our partner organizations are doing. And we're now heading into, our province is among several provinces in Canada and eventually everywhere. We're finally adopting a national school food program, which we were the only G7 country not to have one. And we're finally getting one. And Food First is leading the consultations to shape that. And so that's actually a big conversation we're having, is like, what should school food look like? How does it reflect both some of the things Laurel and League was talking about, but also how does it connect to these local foodways? How does fish show up on kids' plates? And those are some of the big, I think, opportunities and questions around school food, actually, is how can the creation of this new program really maybe move the needle on some of these bigger systems conversations, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. That's, again, you have provided us with some major background information, and I'm learning so much from both of you. Before I let you go, do either of you, I know you do so many different things. Is there anything that you want our listeners to know about the work that you do and the impact that it has on the communities across Newfoundland and Labrador?
I mean, I would just say that the work that we do, we're lucky to be able to do, which is be a supportive organization for partners, right? Like it's in some ways, we have the luxury sometimes of working behind the scenes and being that kind of connection point between partners. And I think there's just an incredible power in network organizations. We're lucky to be part of one. And I really see the gap when I work with folks in a jurisdiction where there isn't some kind of network to help hold people together and connect people, because it's always amazing how much can be gained just from knowing what's happening in your neighboring communities and figuring out how to work together. And that type of work is often some of the hardest work to get funded. But when it does, it really turns into something special. And that's, what we do because there is this network of people who we're able to support and mentor and connect and all those kind of things in our day. I think that maybe that would be just so this isn't the Food First show, right? Like we have our own programs, but a lot of what we do wouldn't happen without this kind of broader network. Laurel, how about you?
Well, it's wonderful to know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'd say I never really started off being very passionate about food. I came to this work from more of a anti-poverty lens and food insecurity in many ways being a symptom of poverty. I was like, oh, sure, I'll do this. But what I've learned over the years that I've been doing this work is food is a really non-polarizing way of having some big, complex, sometimes heavier fraught conversations with people you don't always agree with. Food is one of those places where we can see partners come together around tables that they normally wouldn't be able to have conversations at. And I think, I've been really inspired as of late by what's been able to be accomplished when it comes to talking about this crisis that seems to be affecting so many of us, a crisis of unaffordable food and not enough money to buy it, but also what it means to have access to our local foods or be able to grow in our own gardens. And so that's what I've been thinking a lot about as being really special and inspiring, especially when, we're looking ahead at some fraught times.
Wow, absolutely. I am so glad that we had some time to spend together and for me to learn more about the work that you do and for you to share, your expertise and your impact with our audience in North America and beyond. If folks want to learn more about your work, where do they find it?
foodfirstnl.ca is the website. We're on Blue Sky. We're on Facebook. We're on LinkedIn. You can find us all the usual places.
Fantastic. Well, great stuff. Thank you to you both. Thanks for taking the time. And I won't keep you any further from doing the good work that you do. This is Eat Your Heartland Out with me, Capri Cafaro. After the break, I'll be back with our next guest, Anka Roman, the Associate Director of Ethnicity Catering and Cafe in Calgary.
This episode is brought to you by Wisconsin Cheese. There's a reason when you think of Wisconsin, you think cheese. Cheese is a huge part of Wisconsin's history and future. In Wisconsin, the state of cheese, the tradition of cheese-making excellence began 180 years ago, before Wisconsin was recognized as a state. Immigrants traveled to settle in this lush green hills of Wisconsin, bringing their cheese-making traditions with them. These storied skills, combined with the freshest milk available, created a cheesemaking culture that is uniquely Wisconsin. Wisconsin's 1,200 cheesemakers, many of whom are third and fourth generation, continue to pass on old world traditions while adopting modern innovations in cheesemaking craftsmanship. Find your next favorite cheese at wisconsincheese.com.
Welcome back to Eat Your Heartland Out. I'm your host, Capri Cafaro. Before the break, I was speaking with Josh Smee and Laurel Huguet about addressing the food insecurity needs of communities across Newfoundland and Labrador, and doing it in a nutritious, affordable, and culturally appropriate way. And now I want to welcome a guest from clear across the other side of Canada, and that's Anka Roman. She's the Associate Director of Ethnicity, Catering, and Cafe in Calgary, Alberta. Anka, thank you so much for joining the program. We're happy to have you.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. Well, you do important work, and it's really interesting as well. There in Calgary, Alberta. First, maybe you can introduce our listeners to what the Center for Newcomers does.
Thank you for that. Center for Newcomers in Calgary is one of the largest immigrant serving agencies in Alberta. We've been around for over 36 years now, and furthermore, we serve up to 50,000 individual clients every year. So, as you can imagine, we do work hard. When I started at the Center for Newcomers, we were which is a long time ago, we were about 30 something staff members. We are over 200 now. So you can
Wow.
how much we have grown. On the other hand, I myself worked in several positions at the center and have been with ethnicity catering for only over 3 years now. I could tell you more about what we do in general at the center, or I can continue by telling you what we specifically do at the at ethnicity.
Well, ethnicity is what I want to talk about, because I know that it has a mission, as part of the broader mission for Center for Newcomers. But ethnicity is special because it's serving and supporting immigrant women, right? And is a social enterprise too. So tell our listeners about how it got started and who it serves.
So ethnicity catering started over 20 years ago as a community kitchen in a church basement here in Calgary, somewhere on Edmonton Trail. At that time, women would just meet and exchange recipes, cook, talk together. It was all about getting immigrant women out of isolation. And this is something that we have continued to do so over the years in the way that we know that highly barriered women, often racialized, have a hard time fitting into the society, either because of, let's say, English barriers, or because they are usually the primary caretakers for their children and for their families. Yes, so in other words, then what happens is they don't get chances to go into employment. So therefore, here is where we come in. Now, the program itself and ethnicity, as a program, has evolved over the years. So from a very small program, really, as I said, the community kitchen, for the past 15, 16 years, we have evolved into a training program that has been funded either by the IRCC, by the federal government, or by Alberta government, and with some funds also from United Way. So what we do in the social enterprise, and of course, I'm very pleased to tell you that since 2021, we actually have 2 kitchens and 2 cafes that we operate. We have yes. So from a single kitchen and some catering, we now have actually storefront cafes, if you wish. 2 of them very popular, especially the one at Village Square, where I am at the moment. So what we do is we generate income that supports us by training the students and by working with them in the kitchen
Right.
and in the cafe. So we in this. So if we look at the training part, what trainees get is usually in skills for work. In class and also in the kitchen and cafe, if you wish, right? So, in other words, they come for 10 to 12 weeks with us, part time. It's a part time program, up to 20 hours a week. They get class in class training. They get an Alberta health certificate for food handling. But they also then work in the kitchen and at the cafe. So what they do, they earn skills such as basic commercial kitchen skills, and they also get customer service skills. Now,
Yes.
you did say women. We have men, indeed. 80% I would say from our program participants get to be women, but we also get some men.
So, what do you need to qualify? Like, who is the target audience for the kitchen training program? Are there specific criteria that one needs to meet in order to be able to apply and participate?
Yes, yes. So we target our targeted population does. It's a combination of newcomers and refugees, or I should say, permanent residents and refugees who are new to Canada. But we also had individuals of immigrant background who had been in Canada for a long time, but with no employment prospects. So we take those people too. So somebody who may have been here for years and years. We generally look at individuals who do not have Canadian work experience at all. They have never worked. They may have worked back in their countries, but not here, and seem to have a hard time finding jobs. Because one of the things that we do is not only building employment skills, but also supporting individuals in getting skills after at the end of the program. Yes, after graduation. So by saying that, what else? We do look at it also at individuals who are ready, willing, and able to work. Our what we want is individuals who will look for jobs at the end of the program. We take about up to 16 to 18 in those 3 months that they are with us. We at the moment we provide them with meals when they are with us and with transportation tickets. We find that we've had even now individuals who cannot afford to come to training because they do not have means of transportation. So we provide them as an incentive with transportation tickets. We provide them with meals, as I said, and they come. They come and learn and work with us. Something that our students truly enjoy is our catering events. Very many of them get to go out of our premises to catering events.
Oh, wow.
Yes, one of the biggest we've ever served was at Amazon for quite a few people, a few hundred people, and
Oh, wow.
yes, that was last year. But we've had events in non-profit organizations, in big organizations such as Amazon, but also private functions such as wedding, birthdays, and what have you. So,
That's
and
wonderful.
yes, yes, and the students really like it. They also like their interaction with customers at the cafe, and generally speaking, they're pleased with the skills that they obtain while with us, and of course with the jobs that come after.
Right. Yeah. So what have you been able to quantify the impact of, these training programs and this job experience for, for immigrants and for those that are unemployed, underemployed, et cetera, for your target population, have you been able to quantify the impact of their ability to then continue to work in the food service sector?
Yes, we have. Now, first of all, that we have an exit survey and the follow up meetings and emails with our clients. 95% of them declare themselves very satisfied with the program. They, at this percentage, they indicate that they have improved their confidence, their English skills, and confidence in applying for jobs, and they also report that they have expanded their network, their social network, by making friends, by understanding more about services in the community. The employment rates over the years have varied. At the moment, we have about 75% of them who find jobs or further training at the end of their graduation, after the graduation, or at the end of their program. I would want to add, though, that not all of them necessarily work in the food industry. We have our own, or the center, I should say, have our own employment partners who. And we've talked to people from the food industry, and we know the ups and downs of the food industry. So, in other words, for example, during Stampede, during the summer season, there's a high demand for jobs in the food industry and hospitality. So is prior to the winter holidays, to Christmas and such. A time like now in January, we know that it's harder to work in the food industry. So
Right.
therefore, clients have looked at other jobs, or graduates, I should say, and found such jobs. So we are pleased with our 75% employment rate.
Yes.
During the pandemic, it was much, much lower.
This is something that, I was curious about how, the catering and the social enterprise in particular has been received in the greater Calgary community. And it sounds like
Mhm.
people are choosing to utilize the services because they are, um, you know, uh, supporting the mission.
That's correct. That's correct, and it makes us very proud to hear that that individuals seek us out precisely because of for our food, because it is ethnic, but some because of who we help. And what we do for the society at large. So that's something that, again, it's at the heart of what we do. Yes.
That's wonderful. Can you give us an example of a menu that might be reflective of some menu items that capture that the ethnic flavors that you're providing to clients?
Yes, absolutely. We are well known for our samosas, and we are and even more known because samosas are made just about everywhere. We are in Northeast, and of course, one can buy samosas from many places. But we are very well known for our fatayr. Fatayr is a Middle Eastern um, appetizer, if you wish. So it is if you think of a roll, of a dough roll, filled with either meat or the most popular is the one that's filled with cheese and spinach. So we find that just about each and every order that it's placed with us contains fatayrs and samosas. But we also cook, so this being, samosa being, if you wish, from India, Pakistan, fatayr being from the Arabic countries. But we also cook Mexican flavors. We also cook Filipino flavors. We have pancit very often, a vegetarian one, or with chicken. We What else we offer? Well, we also offer what one would think of Canadian food for teenagers, which we have plenty of them at Village Square, which is a poutine, with
yes.
cheese and so on. But it is though the jerk chicken, Jamaican jerk chicken that we offer. It is the ethnic flavors that we are known for, and when people seek out that food, and that's important for us. We try to customize, so we may get clients who, rather than order for catering events that is, rather than order off our menu from our menu, they want something special, something different for them. So and we do that. We have the ability to do that. We have our chef is fairly versatile. Food is good, is well prepared, I would say, and tasty. Of course, I'm very subjective when I say so, because I've had, I'm aware.
I wish we could do a taste test, over the radio.
I know. Yes, yes. I'm trying to tell you at the moment about our biggest event this summer. It was with the Shriners.
Yes.
Yes. We served, I'm trying to think, probably over 3,000 people in two different Stampede breakfasts.
Oh, for the Stampede. Okay.
Yes. And the reason they chose us was precisely because of our ethnic dishes. So yes, we had some of the things that were, Stampede-like, if you wish, the bacon and eggs and so on. But we also had things that were our own, meaning ethnic foods. Yes.
Sure. And for people who don't know, the Calgary Stampede is a major event every year that, brings in thousands of visitors, and, is a bit of a rodeo setting for people that aren't, and other things too. But just so folks know that is a large scale event, and, to do stuff with that is a pretty big deal.
Yes. So perhaps if you had other questions, I would welcome those questions. I cannot speak highly enough of what we do here at Ethnicity and at the center in general.
Well, it sounds like, I'll end the conversation where I started. I mean, you do important work. It sounds like it's incredibly impactful, well received, and tasty, and bringing different flavors to the community while, doing good and supporting those newcomers to the community as well. If our listeners want to learn more about the organization or the Ethnicity Catering, where could they learn more information?
So that would be centerfornewcomers.ca. Yes,
okay.
Centerfornewcomers.ca.
And for our American listeners, it's CENTRE for newcomers.
Thank you so very much for saying so.
You've been listening to Eat Your Heartland Out. This episode was produced by me, Capri Cafaro. Our audio engineers are Liam Warner and Armin Spengen. Theme music by Jason Shaw. You can learn more about the show by visiting heritageradionetwork.org/Eat Your Heartland Out. Eat Your Heartland Out is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.